In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some review examples from Unit 2B, Objectives 6, 7, and 8, so that we can complete this practice quiz and eventually take our quiz on this unit. So let's take a look at a 2-6 review problem first. So this says, given the following statement, determine whether it is a good definition by writing it as a conditional statement and writing its converse. Make sure to evaluate the truth value of both statements to determine if it is a good definition. So first thing I want to do is, if it is not already a conditional statement, I want to write it as a conditional statement. So this is if P, then Q. That's what we're looking for here. So we're talking about a pair of angles, and we're talking about them being a linear pair. So I'm going to have that be my P statement. And then we're also talking about them being both adjacent and supplementary. I'm going to let that be my Q. So to write this as a conditional statement, we're going to say if, and a pair is 2. So I'm going to say 2 angles are a linear pair, then they are both adjacent and supplementary. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and write the converse. So this is where we switch our statements. So we have if Q, then P now. Okay, so here's our converse statement. If 2 angles are adjacent and supplementary, then they are linear pairs. So we have to go back and we have to evaluate the truth value of these 2 statements. So this first statement, if 2 angles are a linear pair, then they are both adjacent and supplementary. That is true. Second statement, if 2 angles are adjacent and supplementary, then they are a linear pair. That is also true. So because we have a true and a true, this is a good definition. So remember, a good definition follows the same rules as that biconditional, where we need both to be true in order to have a good definition or write a biconditional. We always need a conditional and a converse statement. We need the truth values. In order to be a good definition, we need true and true. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. So same objective. So we're looking at the statement, if an angle measures 45 degrees, then it is acute. So this is already a conditional statement. So I'm just going to put NA. We don't have to rewrite it as a conditional statement. It already is if then. But we are going to write its converse. So let's take a look at what that would be. Okay, so here's our converse. If an angle is acute, then its measurement is 45 degrees. So let's go ahead and evaluate some truth values. So first off, if an angle measures 45 degrees, then it is acute. That is true. So our conditional is true. That is definitely an acute angle. So let's flip this. If an angle is acute, then its measurement is 45 degrees. Well, let's see if I can think of a counterexample. So if an angle is acute, this statement is saying its only possibility is to measure 45 degrees. Well, what about a 60-degree angle? That's still acute, but it does not measure 45 degrees. So I've just proven this statement to be false. Anytime we have a single false, it fails the criteria for being able to be written as a biconditional. So we would say it is not a good definition. All right, so just to recap, we have anything that's false. We should always write a counterexample, and then we would say that it is not a good definition. Let's take a look at some 2-7 review problems. So this was our Venn diagram section. So our first problem, say, draw a Venn diagram to represent each situation, each statement. Some band students play flute. So this is our some case, so that means they only overlap a little bit. So we're going to have two circles, one of them being our band students and one of them being our flute players. All right, so if we're looking at this, we have two sections or three sections. This section over here are people that are in the band but do not play flute. The overlap are people that are in the band and play flute. And the people over here are people who play flute but are not in the band. All right, all squares are rectangles. So here we go. We have a big circle and we're looking at all of them. So all of them are contained in that big circle. Okay, so all squares are rectangles. So if you're a square, then you belong in the category of rectangles. So squares here are smaller circle, rectangles are our larger circle. Okay. How many students, let's see, like tennis or baseball, but not handball? So we want to look at a couple of these things. So whenever I have a not, I always go and find that section so that I know to stay out of there. So here's handball. We do not play handball, so we know that none of these people are going to be in this category. Okay, the rest of it is students can like tennis or baseball. So one, the other one, both of them. So these people like tennis, so that works. These people like tennis and baseball. These people like just baseball. So if we're looking for this one, we're going to take those 6 people plus the 12 plus the 16. So we have a total of 34 people that fit this category. Next up, we're looking at how many students like handball or tennis. So if we're looking at this, we have the handball category and we have the tennis category. So anybody belonging in either of those categories, because it's an or, will work out. So anybody that likes just tennis, anybody that likes handball. Okay, so we're kind of ignoring baseball right now because it didn't tell us anything about that, doesn't really care about baseball. And then anybody that liked both of them. So all of these belong in our category. So we're going to add them all up. And we get a total of 61 people who like handball or tennis. All right, let's take a look at this next one. How many students like only handball? Okay, so here's handball. They are only allowed to belong in the handball circle and they're not allowed to be in any other circle. So these people like tennis. These people, in addition to liking handball, like tennis and baseball. These people, in addition to liking handball, like baseball. And these 9 students are left over are the ones that only like handball. All right. How many students like handball, baseball, and tennis? So they have to like all 3. Okay. So these 9 up here, just handball. Then just tennis, just baseball. So we can eliminate those because they have to like all 3 sports. These 12 here, they like tennis and baseball, so not all 3. These 14 like handball and tennis, that's not all 3. These 13 like handball and baseball, that's not all 3. So we're looking at these 7 where we can see all 3 of our circles have overlapped. So 7 people like handball, tennis, and baseball. So all 3. Let's take a look at some 2-8. Determine whether each conclusion is based on inductive or deductive reasoning. So just to recap, Inductive reasoning is based on patterns or observations, while deductive reasoning is based on rules, definitions, and things like that. So we want to determine which one of these are we using. Given the sequence 19, 23, 27, and 31, you conclude that your next term will be 35. So I look at this sequence and I observe that each time I move to the next number, I am adding 4. So I say, okay, well, I think that the next time I'm going to continue this and add 4. So this is an observation of a pattern. This is going to be inductive reasoning. Okay. Isosceles triangles, that should be capitalized, have 2 equal sides. Okay, that's a definition. You see a triangle that has 2 equal sides, and you conclude that it is isosceles. So we're using this definition of what is an isosceles triangle in order to say that this triangle that we see is in fact isosceles. Because we're using a definition, this would be deductive reasoning. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more 2A problems here. So we're looking at law of detachment or the law of syllogism. Okay, so one thing we have to do is be able to tell the difference. So law of detachment, I always identify potential law of detachment problems because they have one if-then statement, okay? But law of syllogism, if we have a law of syllogism situation, it will have 2 if-then statements, okay? So let's see, number 1, if a number is divisible by 6, then the number is even. Then it says 24 is divisible by 6. Okay, so first thing, I have one if-then statement. So if this is going to use a law, it's going to be law of detachment. So we want to see if we can draw a valid conclusion. So it gave me an if-then statement and it said 24 is divisible by 6. So let's go back to our sentence. I know 24 is divisible by 6. I can read 4 words in my sentence and say, okay, well, then the number must be even. So 24 must be even. And we know that because of the law of detachment. Okay, so this is the case where we had P, then Q. It gave us P. Therefore, we know that Q happened. Okay, so you want to note the direction that this arrow is going in. It's only going towards the right. So if they gave us part of statement Q, so for example, if they said 24 is even, I can't go against the arrow and say that 24 is divisible by 6. Law of detachment works one way and one way only. Okay, number 2. If the teacher reminds us to study, then we will have a quiz tomorrow. If we have a quiz tomorrow, then I will be nervous. So this has 2 if-then statements, which should clue us into potentially using law of syllogism. So for law of syllogism, we need to know if P implies Q and Q implies R, then we can cut out the middleman, right? So that middleman is the same. And we know, therefore, P implies R. So we need that middle statement to be the same. So let's see here. Here's our middle statement. We will have a quiz tomorrow. We have a quiz tomorrow. They are the same. So what we can do is go ahead and just cross them right out. What we're left with is our valid conclusion. So if the teacher reminds us to study, then we're going to skip, then I will be nervous. And this was valid by the law of syllogism.